Richard Allen has a new home. He's no longer being housed in Indiana at the Pendleton Correctional Facility. Oh no. He's being welcomed now. He's getting his new DOC number in the state of Oklahoma at the Lexington Intake Center. Oh, I've been through this one myself. I've been through that transfer, not from Indiana, but I was transferred from Arizona to Oklahoma. So I know everything that Richard Allen's going through is he's going to be making his new home in the Oklahoma system on a maximum security yard. Let's discuss this. I'm ARHayes. Welcome to A Convict's Thoughts. And here we are. Here we are. Richard Allen. Remember Richard Allen from the Delphi case? Libby and Abby? Richard Allen was actually convicted in December of 2024 for the murders of Abby Williams and Libby Germain in Delphi, Indiana. He's actually been transferred. He's been transferred out of state from his home at the Pendleton Correctional Facility to his new home in Oklahoma, where he right now is going through intake. As of Friday, July 18th, 2025, Allen was transferred and he's going through the Lexington Assessment and Reception Center in Cleveland County, Oklahoma. And let me tell you, this center, it's a different one, ladies and gentlemen. It houses everything from minimum to your maximum security closed custody inmates. So it's a moving parts facility where you get your DOC number. So there's no more comfortability for Mr. Richard Allen as he's serving his sentence of 130 years. His attorneys had filed motions to move him to a different facility within Indiana because he was working his way through the appeals process. Remember, Richard Allen was convicted of the counts of murder, 4 counts, sentenced to 130 years, but that left him open and available to utilize his appeal process. The problem now is he's been moved all the way down to Oklahoma. This is nowhere near his attorneys, ladies and gentlemen. It's nowhere near his family. He now will be housed in Oklahoma on a yard where he most likely does not know a single person. And I get it. Many would say, well, that's going to make his time easier. That's going to make his time easier because of his crimes. Because of the crimes that he committed against 2 very young females, 13 and 14 years old to be exact. They were very young, just teenagers, beautiful little girls. And he was convicted of that sickening crime. But remember, he went through the dark courts with Judge Gold. This was one of the most eye-popping and focused upon cases due to the lack of transparency, just like other cases that are happening right now in our country. Richard Allen, when found guilty, began the process of his appeals. He has attorneys on the ball, ready to work for him. But now, no longer will they be able to meet as often in person. No longer is this process going to be easy to work back and forth between them, the lawyer and the client. the distance is going to make this much more difficult. It's going to be snail mail type of time frame. Makes it extremely hard on the appeal process. And you have to also remember, if Richard Allen does actually sneak in the appeal that he's looking for, if a court and a judge goes ahead and approves that, well, then he's going to have to venture from an Oklahoma penitentiary via a van to make it back to that court hearing. Let me tell you, it's tiresome. It is tiresome. I personally was transferred from the state of Arizona to Oklahoma. I had to go through Lexington Center to get my DOC number during my transfer. The only thing that I was fortunate is I had already worked my way through the appeal process. I was guilty. Arizona had an interstate compact to where they actually transferred numerous inmates from the state of Arizona, both on a minimum custody level and a medium custody level, to the state of Oklahoma. I personally was at the time a high medium close custody inmate, but because of disciplinary issues, I was able to be housed on the higher close custody maximum security yard. So when I arrived at the intake center in Oklahoma at the Lexington Center, I was deemed to be a close custody maximum security inmate, which would be the exact same thing as Richard Allen. I would just, of course, be housed in a different part of the penitentiary because of the difference in our nature of crime. Richard Allen is going to be in segregation. He is going to be in ADSED. They are probably still extremely worried, and I'm really stating that his lawyers and the people that love him are extremely worried about his health and safety. The state of Indiana, the state of Oklahoma, they don't care. They don't care. When I got to Oklahoma, they did not care that I was a diabetic. They did not care that I had health issues and I needed help. All they cared about was the fact that Arizona was going to be paying them to house me, and they could throw me into a cell and pretty much just handle it whatever which way they wanted to, because I was far away from family and loved ones that could complain on my behalf to the outside. See, if you want to make any type of complaint, if you want to get anything done while being incarcerated in the penitentiary to get yourself either better care or better living situation, just getting your privileges like visitation and phone calls, it needs to be done through loved ones on the outside. They need to be able to go to the central office facilities, wherever you're housed, to be able to push the issue. If you're trying to do it from within the penitentiary, then unfortunately that's never going to actually work for you. It's never going to actually work for you because they are not going to care at all about your complaints. They're going to ignore them, especially when you come from another state. So Richard Allen now is going to be an Indiana prisoner being housed in Oklahoma. He will be moved around quite a bit. When he gets out of the intake portion of the system, he's going to be moved throughout the state of Oklahoma. He will most likely see every maximum security prison complex that they have in Oklahoma, because they're going to keep him on the move. They're going to keep it to where it's difficult for him to be able to mingle with the others. Because he's an out-of-state inmate, they try to keep you somewhat, I guess, safer or protected because of the fact you're in an out-of-state facility. And if you were to get attacked or if you were to get injured, lawsuits could be placed against them for not housing you properly. I've seen that happen. Haven't seen many people win those lawsuits, but I have seen them happen. But Richard Allen's path now is going to be much more difficult. he, of course, is going to be pushing to get his appeals heard. But now that he's in the state of Oklahoma, it's going to be much more difficult for that to happen. And time restraints on his appeals could come into play because being an out of state inmate can literally slow those types of things down. His visitation is going to be much more difficult. You have to reapply for visitation to get his loved one, his wife, and anybody else that wants to visit him. His phone calls are going to be much more expensive if he's able to make those. There's so much that goes into this, but literally, I'm sure he was laying in a cell in Pendleton Correctional in Indiana on Thursday night, thinking that everything would be normal, and the next morning he got awoke, cuffed up, shackled to be, and moved, and he had no idea where he was going. Not a clue. And he wasn't able to let anybody else know where he was going or where he would be housed. Even his attorneys would not know that information until after he arrived to where he was going and after he makes it through his intake process. I do understand that you can see it already online. You can already see that he's in the intake center. But what you don't really realize until it comes into play for you, yourself, or someone you love is just because it shows you online being in that intake center doesn't mean that they're ever going to let you know where you actually are until you get to your home yard. Nobody's going to know how to write you. You're not going to have phone numbers. You're not going to be able to get visits. Everything is completely put on hold until you get to your first yard, wherever that may be. And at that point, you can start applying for visitation phone calls. And that's when it will update in the system. Typically, when they moved me from Arizona to Oklahoma, it was about 60 days after the fact that the people that were looking for me were able to find me and to be able to find a way to write me. It took another 90 days for me to be able to get my telephone calls turned on. An additional about 90 days after that, then I started learning whether my visitation was approved or not. The funny thing for me was by the time I got my visitation and I got my actual phone calls turned on, they were already in the process of transferring me back to Arizona because the contractual agreement between Arizona and Oklahoma had come to an end for maximum security inmates. So I had to go back. And then they also made a decision that out of state inmates could no longer have medical issues. So Arizona was obviously having to bring the majority of the inmates they had sent back to Arizona. So it was just a road trip. For me, it was a road trip, but you need to understand this will probably be the first stop for Mr. Richard Allen because there's a good chance that he could go from here into a whole nother state. He could potentially go from Oklahoma to Arizona, and then maybe he would hit some of the yards that I know so well that I spent the majority of my time. He would rather stay in Oklahoma. I'll tell you that right now. He would rather stay in Oklahoma. But no penitentiary system's a good place to be, especially when you're serving 130 years and you've got to keep the eyes over your shoulder and watch everything that's coming from behind. You have to remember the crime that he was convicted of is not well taken within the penitentiary, and that's why Richard Allen is now making his home in Oklahoma until he's found out and the inmates there figure out who he is and what his crimes are. And at that point, there's a good chance Richard Allen will be shackled, cuffed, back on that van, heading to a new place with a new cover. I appreciate you joining me for the breaking news. As of Friday, July 18th, Richard Allen moved to his new home in Oklahoma. We'll see how long it lasts there. I hope you're having a great weekend, and I hope to see you again very, very soon. Have a great day.